The Night of Broken Glass. On the nights of November 9th to 10th, 1938, Nazi Germany crossed a terrifying threshold. What had been years of discrimination against Jews erupted into open, organized violence. This event became known as Kristallnacht, a German word meaning the night of broken glass, named for the shattered windows that littered Jewish neighborhoods across Germany and Austria. But Kristallnacht was far more than broken glass. It was a warning flare for the Holocaust to come. The backdrop, years of rising hatred. When Adolf Hitler rose to power in 1933, antisemitism became state policy. Jews were gradually stripped of their rights. Jewish businesses were boycotted. Jews were removed from government jobs. Jewish children were expelled from schools. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 stripped Jews of citizenship and legal protection. By 1938, Jews were isolated, labeled, and blamed for Germany's problems. What remained was the spark that would ignite violence. The trigger. On November 7th, 1938, a 17-year-old Jewish refugee named Herschel Greenspan shot a German diplomat in Paris. The diplomat died 2 days later. The Nazi leadership used this assassination as a pretext, not a cause, but an excuse for a nationwide attack they had long desired, the Night of Terror. Across Germany, Austria, and the Sudetenland, over 7,500 Jewish businesses were smashed and looted. More than 1,400 synagogues were burned or destroyed. Jewish homes, hospitals, and schools were vandalized. At least 91 Jews were murdered. Approximately 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps like Dachau, Buchenwald, and Sachsenhausen. Fire brigades were ordered to protect non-Jewish property only. Police were instructed not to intervene. This was not a riot. It was a state-orchestrated pogrom, the cruel aftermath. In a final act of cruelty, the Nazi government blamed the Jews themselves. Jewish communities were fined 1 billion Reichsmarks for the damage. Jews were forced to clean up the ruins. Insurance payments for destroyed Jewish property were confiscated by the state. After Kristallnacht, Jewish life in Germany became impossible. Emigration increased, but many nations, including the United States, kept immigration quotas tight, leaving millions trapped. Why Kristallnacht matters. Kristallnacht marks a turning point. It was the first large-scale public violence against Jews under Nazi rule. It revealed the full cooperation of government, police, and citizens. It showed the world what was coming and how little the world would respond. Historian Ellie Wiesel later said that silence itself became an accomplice, a moral lesson. Kristallnacht teaches us that genocide does not begin with gas chambers. It begins with words, laws, indifference, and silence. Broken windows were only the beginning. Broken lives followed, from broken glass to broken souls. Kristallnacht and Night by Ellie Wiesel. Kristallnacht, November 9th to 10th, 1938, was the moment the world could have seen clearly. Jewish homes burned, synagogues collapsed into ash, storefronts lay in shards of glass, and the world largely watched and moved on. Ellie Wiesel's Night tells us what came next. Kristallnacht, the world's warning. Kristallnacht did not happen in secret. It unfolded in full public view. Synagogues burned openly. Jewish men were dragged through the streets. Police stood aside. Neighbors watched. This was the moment when persecution became violence, and violence became policy. The Nazi regime tested the world's conscience and discovered it was weak. The silence that followed Kristallnacht spoke loudly. Night, a child inside the consequences. Ellie Wiesel was a young boy living in Sighet, Transylvania. In Night, he recalls early warnings, whispers of deportations, rumors of camps, stories too terrible to believe. Like many others, his community asked, how could this be true? Kristallnacht answered that question. The broken glass of 1938 became the broken families of 1944, when Ellie and his family were forced into ghettos, loaded into cattle cars, and transported to Auschwitz. From public violence to industrial death, Kristallnacht showed the world that Jews could be attacked without consequence. Night shows what happens after the world looks away. Families torn apart on the first night in Auschwitz. Children separated from parents. Faith tested by unimaginable cruelty. Human beings reduced to numbers. Kristallnacht destroyed property. The Holocaust destroyed people. The death of silence. One of the most haunting moments in Night occurs during the execution of a young boy in the camp. As prisoners watch him slowly die, someone asks, where is God now? Wiesel writes, here he is hanging here on this gallows. Kristallnacht was the moment God's name was cursed in the streets. Night is the moment faith itself was forced into the fire. Witness as resistance. Kristallnacht tells us what hatred looks like when it first shows its face. Night tells us what hatred becomes when it is ignored. Ellie Wiesel survived not to explain God, but to bear witness. He famously said, neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages a tormentor, never the tormented. That lesson begins with Kristallnacht, a call to remember and respond. Kristallnacht asks, what happens when injustice is visible and unchallenged? Night answers, it grows into something unspeakable. Together they call us to remember that remembrance is not passive. Memory carries responsibility. To remember Kristallnacht is to shatter silence. To read night is to refuse forgetting.